I've never been the suspicious type. Not in 20 years of marriage, not when Kaylee went on those long girls' trips or came home later than me from work. I was the guy who gave the benefit of the doubt, who chalked weird behavior up to stress or hormones or just the everyday ups and downs of life. But that Tuesday, that day was different. I had a dentist appointment across town that wrapped up early, and since I was already out of the office, I figured I'd head home. Maybe surprise Kaylee. I picked up Thai from her favorite spot. Red curry with tofu for her, pad cew for me. I was even feeling good, optimistic. Maybe this would help smooth over whatever weird tension had been hanging between us lately. When I walked through the front door around 4:30, the house was dead quiet. Our two golden retrievers, Boomer and Scout, didn't even come to greet me right away, which was odd. They're usually barking like maniacs the second the door opens. "Hello?" I called out, setting the takeout bags on the kitchen counter. "Kaylee?" "Nothing." I stepped into the hallway, and that's when I caught it, the smell. It hit me like a punch to the chest. It wasn't food. It wasn't cleaning spray. It was cologne. Strong. Spicy. Not mine. I paused in the middle of the hallway, trying to place the scent. It was unfamiliar, bold, the kind of cologne that announces someone's presence before they even say a word. I don't wear cologne, haven't since our wedding day. Kaylee always said she liked me natural. I moved quietly up the stairs, my steps slow and cautious. I wasn't thinking anything specific yet, just a vague unease spreading through me. I told myself maybe her brother had stopped by. Maybe it was something she ordered. Maybe I was overreacting. I reached the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently. She was sitting on the edge of the bed. "Kaylee." She looked up at me so quickly it was like she'd been hit with a jolt of electricity. Her hands were on her lap, her shoulders stiff, eyes wide and shining just a little too much. On the floor next to the dresser was a men's shirt. Button down. Navy blue. Definitely not mine. I stared at it and my stomach clenched. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Kaylee stood up like her feet were on springs. "Noah," she said, voice high, startled. "You're home early." I nodded slowly. I wanted to say something casual, play it cool, but all I could do was glance at the shirt again. She followed my gaze. I watched her eyes flit to the shirt, then back to me. That's when it started, the pivot. "Oh God, that thing?" She laughed, stepping over and picking it up. "I was going through the donation bags in the garage earlier. You remember? I told you I wanted to clear out the closet before summer hits." I didn't remember her saying that. She held the shirt up almost proudly. "It's old. I don't even know whose it is. Might have been yours from college or something." Anyway, I brought it up to toss in the hamper, and I must have gotten distracted. Her voice was too chipper, too rehearsed. The way she moved, the way she smiled at me, it felt off. Like a poorly directed scene in a play where the actress forgot half her lines. I just stood there, frozen in the doorway. Then she noticed my expression. Her whole posture changed. The smile faded. Her shoulders sagged a little. "Noah," she said softly, approaching me. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was staring at her, but my mind was running in circles. She reached out, placing a hand on my arm. "Are we okay?" she asked, voice trembling now. "I mean, lately I've just been feeling like something's off between us. You've been distant, distracted, and now you're giving me this look like you don't trust me." I flinched at that. I wasn't expecting her to flip the script so fast. "I'm not accusing you of anything," I said slowly. "But you're thinking it," she said, her eyes starting to water. "You come home early, find me cleaning up, and now I'm on trial?" "No one's on trial." Her voice cracked. "God, Noah. After everything we've been through, do you really think I'd?" She let the sentence hang in the air. A heavy silence followed. Then she started crying. Real tears or an act? I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. I did what I always do. I tried to smooth things over. I told her it was fine. That I was just tired. That the shirt had thrown me off, that I believed her. But I didn't. Not really. That night, she was overly affectionate. She made my favorite pasta for dinner, opened a bottle of wine, sat beside me on the couch and leaned into me like it was our anniversary. She laughed a little too loudly at a sitcom we'd seen a dozen times. Kept her phone face down on the coffee table. Every move was polished. Controlled. And I played along. We went to bed just after 10. She curled up next to me like she used to when we were newlyweds. I lay there stiff as a board, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing even out. That cologne still lingered faintly in the sheets. I didn't sleep much that night. Something had changed. I didn't know what it was or when exactly it started, but I knew with every part of me that it was real. And despite all her tears, her explanations, her hand on my arm and voice in my ear, I couldn't shake the feeling. She was hiding something. and I was finally starting to notice. The morning after the cologne and the shirt, I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror longer than usual. I looked tired. Older. Like a man just starting to wake up from a dream he didn't know he'd been trapped in. Kaylee was already downstairs when I came out of the shower, humming to herself in the kitchen like everything was perfectly normal. She had pancakes on the stove, coffee brewed, and even had my favorite mug ready. She greeted me with a bright smile and a kiss on the cheek like it was some Hallmark commercial. I smiled back, said thank you, and sat down, but inside I was trying to read between the lines. Every move she made felt like it had a second meaning. Every laugh, every glance, every good morning was filtered through the lens of what I'd seen the day before. That shirt. That scent. At work, I couldn't focus. My mind kept rewinding to the past few weeks. I started going over every interaction we'd had recently. The late-night gym visits. The forgotten wedding ring. The new clothes, nothing too flashy, but different. More fitted. Younger. There had been a shift in her energy, too. A different perfume she wore sometimes. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. A laugh that sounded practiced. For months, I'd told myself she was just going through something, maybe a midlife funk. We're both pushing 50. I thought maybe she just needed space, time to rediscover herself. But now? Now I wasn't so sure. I opened my budgeting app, the one we both used but that I managed more closely. I hadn't really looked at the fine details in a while, but as I scrolled through our joint account history, a pattern began to emerge: small, consistent cash withdrawals every Friday. Always between $100 and $200. ATM locations varied, sometimes near her gym, other times on the opposite side of town. Never explained, never discussed. Then came the credit card charges. Spa treatments she never mentioned. A couple of new charges at department stores she hadn't visited in years. Boutique clothing stores. One in particular that I knew specialized in high-end lingerie. That stopped me cold. I clicked deeper. Hotel reservations. There was one made about 3 weeks ago at a boutique hotel downtown. I remembered that night. She'd told me she was heading out to visit her college friend, Vanessa, who'd flown in for a quick business trip. They were catching up over dinner, she said, maybe staying out late. I hadn't thought twice about it. Now I stared at the charge. Room booked for 2 adults. Checked in that night. Checked out the next morning. I sat back in my office chair, heart pounding. The numbers weren't lying. They were cold, clinical, and factual in a way words never could be. There was a rhythm to her spending, and it didn't match the life I thought we were living. That night, I didn't bring it up. I watched her instead, watched how she scrolled on her phone with it tilted just slightly out of my view. How she laughed at messages but never mentioned what they were. How she kept her phone glued to her side like it was part of her body. I asked her about the withdrawals, casually. Oh, just cash for groceries, she said. Sometimes those small shops don't take cards. You never mentioned shopping downtown. She smiled, not missing a beat. Just trying new places. Exploring. You know, I get bored of the same routine. She had an answer for everything. And for a moment, I almost believed her. That's the thing about being married to someone for over 2 decades, you want to believe them. You want to believe that the person who stood across from you in front of God and family isn't capable of deception. That the love you've built is strong enough to resist whatever temptations life throws its way. But love, real love, doesn't come with secrecy and deflection. Over the next few days, I started noticing the timing of her gym sessions. They weren't consistent. One night it was 6 o'clock, the next it was 9:30. Once she came home at nearly midnight, sweaty and flushed, claiming she'd lost track of time on the treadmill. She never looked me in the eyes when she said that. I checked her gym location on my phone, the tracking history from her app. She hadn't even been there that night. One day, while she was in the shower, I checked the back seat of her car under the pretense of grabbing my sunglasses. There was a blanket rolled up behind the passenger seat, fleece, worn, with some kind of grassy stain on the corner. A half-empty bottle of wine in the trunk. A receipt for a charcuterie board from a gourmet grocery store. It wasn't from that day. It was from last week. I put everything back exactly where I found it. Later that evening, I asked about her day. Same old, she said, smiling. Nothing exciting. I nodded. Said nothing. The worst part of suspicion is how it eats you alive in slow motion. It's not like flipping a switch. It's a quiet gnawing that starts in your gut and spreads, eating away at every memory, every inside joke, every moment of an asterisk Macy. You start questioning the past. Was she really working late those nights? Was the phone on silent because of clients or because of someone else? She had started keeping her phone with her in the bathroom, in the laundry room, even while feeding the dogs. Once I picked it up just to hand it to her and she practically snatched it out of my hand with a nervous laugh. "Sorry," she said. "Just sensitive work stuff." I nodded, pretending not to notice how her hands shook. That weekend, she told me she was heading out to meet her mom for brunch. I offered to come. She paused just for a second and then said her mom was bringing a few of her cousins, that it would be just girls and I wouldn't enjoy it. I said okay. An hour later, I called her mom. Just to say hello. She picked up right away. "Noah. Hi. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, just checking in. Did Kaylee get there yet?" There was a pause on the other end. "She's not coming, sweetheart," her mom said. "She canceled this morning. Said she had a migraine." I thanked her and hung up, staring at the wall for a solid minute. That was the moment something snapped. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Just clarity. I didn't yell. Didn't storm out. Instead, I went into my home office and started making a list. A spreadsheet, actually organized, detailed, with timestamps and receipts and locations. Every strange transaction, every lie, every red flag I dismissed out of love or laziness. And at the top, in bold letters, I typed, "When did it really start?" I didn't know the answer yet, but I was getting closer. I gave it a week. Not out of patience, but out of purpose. After everything I'd pieced together, the financial inconsistencies, the lies, the half-smiles that didn't reach her eyes, I needed more than just suspicion. I needed truth. Unshakable, undeniable truth. The kind that can't be cried away or covered in excuses. I waited until Kaylee left for what she claimed was a volunteer event with a local women's shelter. Said it was important, something she'd been looking forward to for weeks. I nodded like always. Told her to take her time. The second the garage door rumbled shut behind her car, I got to work. I opened her laptop. She never logged out of anything, never changed her passwords. There was a false sense of safety she carried with her, as if I'd never dare to look. And maybe a year ago, she would have been right. Her emails were clean, too clean. But her calendar told another story. There, hidden in plain sight, was an appointment marked property consultation downtown. It was scheduled 3 weeks prior. Same date as the hotel charge. My heart thudded in my chest. The name listed next to the entry? Dylan Harper. The same Dylan Harper we'd met at a neighborhood fundraiser. A smooth-talking, clean-cut realtor with expensive suits and just enough charm to get away with it. I remembered him shaking my hand, clapping me on the shoulder like we were old friends. "If you ever think of selling that lot near Kettle Creek," he'd said, "I've got buyers lined up." I never thought twice about him. I should have. The hotel's name on our credit card bill matched the date of that consultation. At first, I'd convinced myself it was a meeting room rental. Maybe she was considering selling behind my back, trying to surprise me with a smart investment. But now? It didn't fit. I dialed the number listed on the hotel receipt, using a soft voice and a vague story. "My wife and I stayed there a few weeks ago and she left a necklace in the room. Could you check who was registered under the name Kaylee Baines?" The clerk was polite. "Give me 1 moment." My fingers tapped against the desk as I waited. When she returned, her words were simple and final. "Yes, Mrs. Baines stayed here with a guest, Mr. Dylan Harper. They checked in late afternoon and checked out the next morning." My throat went dry. "Do you have security footage?" "I'm afraid we can't release that without law enforcement or a legal request." "Understood," I said. "Thank you." I hung up, stared at the wall for a full minute, then opened another tab on my browser. I made the call to a private investigator named Laura Miles, referred by a coworker whose divorce had been surgical thanks to her. Laura didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You need surveillance?" she asked. "Evidence?" "I need confirmation," I replied. "And I need it fast." By the next afternoon, she had started digging. I fed her everything I had: dates, locations, Dylan's name, Kaylee's typical routine. She didn't ask judgmental questions. Just said, "Give me 72 hours. What followed was the longest 3 days of my life. I didn't confront Kaylee. I didn't bring up Dylan. I just played my part. Ate dinner, folded laundry, nodded at her stories. She talked more that week than she had in months. Asked about my work, laughed at my old jokes, even suggested we plan a trip this fall. She was warm, present, kind. It made my stomach turn. On the 4th morning, Laura called. "Meet me at my office," she said. "I've got what you asked for." Her office was tucked inside a nondescript building near the courthouse. No signs, no logos, just a name on the buzzer and a file waiting on her desk. She handed it to me without a word. Inside was everything. Photos, dates, time-stamped **TS, receipts, Surveillance stills from that hotel, clear as day. Kaylee, stepping out of an SUV in a green dress I'd never seen before. Dylan holding the door open for her, his hand grazing the small of her back. In another sh*T, they were in the hotel lobby. Her hand on his arm, their bodies leaning close, smiles far too in asterisk mate for two people discussing real estate. I flipped through the file slowly, each page another nail in the coffin. Then I hit the video. Laura queued it up on her monitor and played it without a word. There was Kaylee, laughing, tossing her hair, looking more alive than she had in months. Dylan reached for her waist, pulled her in, and kissed her just outside the elevator doors. Not a peck. A long, drawn-out kiss that ended with her resting her head on his chest before they disappeared down the hall. I didn't speak, didn't cry. I just sat there, watching the final scene of a story I never knew I was a character in. Laura finally broke the silence. "You were right to trust your instincts," she said. I nodded slowly. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for the truth." "You've got it now," she said. "And you've got what you need for court, if that's where this goes." I left her office and drove in silence for an hour, pulling over into an empty church parking lot just to breathe. I sat there with the file on the passenger seat, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding so loud I couldn't think. This wasn't just betrayal. This was strategy. A carefully constructed double life built under my nose. Kaylee had chosen him not just once but repeatedly. She'd lied with ease, embraced me with hands that had touched someone else, kissed me with lips still warm from his mouth. Could have screamed. I could have punched the dashboard, thrown her pictures into the wind. Instead, I drove home, tucked the evidence into the safe behind my bookshelf, and poured myself a glass of whiskey. Just one. When she got home that night, she kissed me on the cheek, told me she'd picked up Thai food, my favorite. I smiled. She had no idea, but I did, and I was done pretending. Once you know the truth, there's no going back. You can try to pretend. You can smile through dinner, laugh at jokes, fold the same towels you've always folded together. But it's all theater, and I was done acting. The night I watched the surveillance footage, I didn't sleep. I laid awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, deliberate circles. Kaylee's breathing was steady beside me, completely unaware that the curtain had dropped. The illusion was over, and what lay beneath was something I couldn't unsee. By sunrise, I had made my decision. This wasn't going to be a screaming match or a teary showdown in the kitchen. I wasn't giving her the stage for another performance. This was business now, clean, deliberate, and final. That morning, while she was in the shower, I walked into our home office and began the process. I opened our shared banking site and started moving funds. Not everything, just enough to isolate our finances. I transferred my direct deposit into a new, separate account she didn't know about. I opened a second checking account and started routing household bills to that one. She wouldn't notice right away. She barely logged in. Next, I made appointments with 3 divorce attorneys. I chose carefully: reputation, strategy, ruthlessness. I wanted someone who wouldn't just file papers but build a case. I needed this to be airtight, not out of spite but out of self-preservation. By the end of the week, I had retained a firm known for representing clients in high-asset, high-conflict divorces. The lead attorney, Ms. Karen Bell, was in her late 50s, calm and razor-sharp. She didn't flinch when I handed her the folder from the private investigator. "This is solid," she said, flipping through the photos. "We'll subpoena the hotel if we need more. But with this, you've already won the leverage battle." We mapped everything out: joint accounts, property deeds, her car lease, our investments, even the vacation fund we'd been saving together for 5 years. "This won't be amicable," I said, staring down at my own signature on the initial paperwork. Karen looked up. "Good. That means you're finally thinking clearly." The next move was closing off legal access. I removed her as an authorized user on our brokerage accounts, called the insurance companies, changed the will and updated the emergency contacts on every document that mattered. She didn't notice. Or maybe she was just too distracted. Over the following days, I kept playing the part: helpful husband, tired accountant, reliable background character in her new story. But the truth gave me clarity, and that clarity gave me control. Every lie she told me now felt small, laughable. One afternoon, I found a receipt in her purse from a jewelry store. A gold bracelet, not my taste. She hadn't shown it to me. When I asked what she did that day, she said she just ran errands. I nodded, told her dinner would be ready in 20. That same night, she kissed my neck and said she missed us. My stomach turned, but I kissed her back and said I missed us too. I was collecting moments now, each lie another brick in the wall I was building between who I used to be and who I had to become. Then came the part one didn't expect. The PI called again. We ran a deeper look into Dylan Harper, Laura said. Thought you might want to see this. She emailed me a second file. Dylan had a record, not criminal, but a pattern. Civil complaints. 3 restraining orders filed by former partners. One was a fellow realtor who accused him of coercion and fraud. Another had alleged he convinced her to co-sign on a private loan and vanished with the funds. None of the cases stuck. He was too slick, too careful, but they painted a picture. A predator. Charming. Calculated. Professional Lothario in a tailored blazer. And Kaylee had fallen right into his hands. I printed the records and added them to the folder in the safe. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was about exposure. Financial, legal, emotional. And I was preparing to close every door he thought he just walked through. The next step was documentation. I started scanning receipts, emails, text messages, everything that could create a narrative. I backed up her phone to my laptop and saved the files to an encrypted drive. A trail was forming, the gradual decline of our Macy, the financial shifts, the days and nights that didn't line up. One afternoon, she mentioned she'd been thinking about us selling the land near Kettle Creek, the same property Dylan had initially expressed interest in. We never use it, she said casually over dinner. Wouldn't it make sense to cash out now while the market's hot? I sipped my water slowly. Maybe. What if we talk to a realtor, she suggested. You know, just see what's out there. I looked her dead in the eye. You mean someone like Dylan Harper? She blinked. Just once. Too fast. Yeah, she said after a pause. He's good, right? I didn't flinch. He seemed confident. But I'd want someone with no personal bias. Clean hands. She smiled, a bit too tight, and nodded. Of course. Just a thought. That was the moment I knew she'd sensed something. A flicker of doubt in her eyes, a beat too long before responding. But she didn't press. She couldn't afford to. Not yet. Over the weekend, she started being nicer. Brought me coffee in bed. Rubbed my shoulders while I worked on the porch. Texted me little emojis she hadn't sent in years. A few days later, she even initiated in Macy. The same woman who had been too tired for months suddenly couldn't keep her hands off me. I let her. I needed the contrast. For my records. 2 days later, I filed. The papers were served at her office right in the middle of a client meeting. That had been intentional. A small, sharp reminder that I was no longer the man she could manipulate. When she got home, her face was pale, her hands shaking. Noah, she said, closing the front door behind her. What is this? I looked up from my chair, calm. It's the truth, Kaylee. Just on paper. Tears sprang to her eyes instantly. You can't be serious. I am. She stepped forward, voice trembling. We can talk about this. We don't have to go through lawyers. That's funny, I said. Because I distinctly remember you choosing a man who made you forget you had a husband. She started crying, then loud, messy sobs. Theatrical. I stood. Walked past her. Picked up my keys from the counter. I'm going to get dinner, I said. You should call yours. I left her in the living room, crumpled on the floor like a scene from a bad drama. But this wasn't fiction. It was the beginning of the end. And I had finally taken control. The courtroom didn't look like justice. It looked like stale air and fluorescent lights. Beige walls. Brown carpet. People in cheap suits pretending they weren't terrified. I sat at the long wooden table with my attorney, Karen Bell, the file folder in front of me like a loaded P*N. Across from me sat Kaylee and her lawyer, a man too young and too confident for someone so clearly outmatched. She didn't look at me. This was our second hearing, but the first one that mattered. Temporary orders were already in place. She'd moved into a rental 2 towns over, and we hadn't spoken outside of terse emails about the dogs. She wanted Boomer. I said no. He was mine before the marriage. She backed down. But today was different. Today was about discovery, evidence, and declarations. The judge was a woman named Irene Castillo, middle-aged, serious, known for her intolerance of dishonesty and drama. I liked her immediately. She looked at people like she saw through them. When the bailiff called our names, she adjusted her glasses, reviewed the file, and looked up. "Let's begin," she said. Kaylee's attorney went first, painting a version of our marriage that sounded nothing like the one I lived in. He spoke of communication breakdowns, of a husband who had grown cold and distant, of a wife seeking connection in a moment of emotional vulnerability. I didn't react. I let them spin their narrative, knowing what was coming. When it was our turn, Karen stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She presented. "Your Honor," she began, "what we have here is not a case of miscommunication. It's a deliberate breach of marital fidelity, with financial misconduct and emotional deception layered on top." She handed the judge a binder. One of many. These documents include hotel receipts, surveillance footage, and communication records, text messages, emails, and financial transfers between the respondent, Kaylee Baines, and a man named Dylan Harper, a local realtor. The affair was not a one-time lapse. It was sustained over months and included plans to liquidate shared assets under false pretenses. The room shifted. Even Kaylee's lawyer lost a shade of color. Karen kept going. "We also have evidence that Mr. Harper has a history of engaging in similar behavior with other married clients. 3 women, separate incidents, same pattern. In one case, he convinced a woman to co-sign a real estate loan, then disappeared. We're submitting sworn affidavits from 2 of them." Kaylee's face turned blank. Not angry, not ashamed, just empty. I watched her slowly absorb the weight of it all. Not just what she'd done, but what it looked like now. On paper, in front of a judge, in a room where performance didn't work anymore. Karen didn't stop. "We've included **TS of attempted property transfers. Documents disguised as brokerage paperwork that would have diverted proceeds from the sale of the Kettle Creek land into a shell account under Mr. Harper's name. My client did not sign off on these forms, nor was he aware of them. We only discovered their existence through a forensic review of the respondent's email." The judge flipped through the binder. Her eyes were sharp, unmoved. "Mrs. Baines," she said at last, "do you dispute these documents?" Kaylee's voice was barely audible. "I'd like to speak to my attorney first." The judge nodded. "You'll have that chance. But I need to know now. Do you contest the evidence?" There was a long pause. Then, "No." It was the first honest thing she'd said in months. The judge turned back to Karen. "Continue." Karen moved to financials, joint accounts, asset division, debt. She outlined how Kaylee had been withdrawing large sums of cash, presumably to obscure her trail, and detailed the movement of funds from our savings into purchases unrelated to the household. When Kaylee's lawyer attempted to argue that these were personal wellness expenses, the judge raised a brow. "A $1,200 bracelet?" she asked. "A $300 bottle of wine? 2-night stay at a spa resort under a false name?" He stammered. Kaylee stared at the table. I sat in silence through it all. Not out of spite, not out of pride, but because I had already lived it. Every night I'd lain awake wondering who she was with. Every moment I spent tracing back the lies. This was just the paperwork. When it came time for the judge's ruling, she didn't draw it out. "Given the weight of the evidence," she began, "and the respondent's admission that the documents are authentic, the court finds in favor of the petitioner, Mr. Baines." She looked directly at Kaylee. "Mrs. Baines, your actions constitute a clear violation of both the financial and emotional covenant of marriage. This court sees no justification for spousal support. The primary residence will remain with Mr. Baines, as will the Kettle Creek land. All remaining assets will be split according to the terms outlined in Exhibit C of the petitioner's proposal. The respondent will retain her personal effects and vehicle." She turned to me. "Mr. Baines, this court commends your thoroughness and restraint. If you wish to pursue damages or civil claims related to the attempted asset transfer, you may do so separately." I nodded once. "Thank you, Your Honor." Court adjourned. Just like that, it was over. Outside the courtroom, Kaylee caught up with me in the hallway. She looked pale, stunned, like she'd walked through a minefield and only now realized it wasn't over yet. "Noah," she said, her voice thin, "can we talk?" I looked at her. Not with hate. Not even with anger. Just clarity. About what? I asked. I didn't know it would get this far, she said. I didn't mean for it to turn into all of this. I gave a small, humorless laugh. Didn't mean? You didn't trip into a hotel bed, Kaylee? She blinked as if the sarcasm hurt worse than shouting would have. I just wanted to feel alive again. I nodded slowly. And now you know what it costs. She looked like she wanted to say more, but Karen appeared at my side with a clipboard and a quiet professionalism that made further conversation impossible. I'll be in touch about the final paperwork, she said. Kaylee backed away. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just walked down the hall, each step echoing like the end of a chapter neither of us ever wanted to write. I stepped outside and breathed in the fresh air. The sky was overcast. The wind sharp. But for the first time in a long, long time, my head was clear. And I was free. 2 months after the court decision, just when I thought it was finally over, Kaylee reached out. It started with a voicemail, calm, almost sweet. Hey, Noah. I was thinking maybe we could meet. Just to finalize some loose ends. Nothing big. Just closure, I guess. I knew better. Her closure was never about peace. It was about leverage, always. I suspected she wanted a recorded apology or maybe some emotional outburst she could twist into something useful for a post-trial appeal. Still, I agreed to meet but not alone. I brought Karen with me. We met in a neutral public office, quiet, sterile, and just uncomfortable enough to keep emotions in check. Kaylee walked in wearing that same careful expression I'd seen so many times before. She tried to smile. I didn't return it. She launched into small talk, how hard things had been, how she missed what we used to have. How Dylan had turned out to be different than she thought. She dropped that line like a stone, waiting to see how I'd react. I didn't blink. When she asked to speak to me privately, Karen stepped in. We're not here to revisit the past, she said firmly. We're here to close what's already settled. Kaylee's face hardened. The mask slipped just for a second and her real expression peeked through, disappointment. Maybe anger. Definitely calculation. She left with nothing. No emotional ammunition. No scene. Just silence. 2 days later, her lawyer received a formal warning for attempting to initiate post-settlement contact without cause. That chapter was sealed. In the months that followed, the house felt different. Not quieter, calmer. I replaced the furniture. Repainted the walls. Got rid of the wedding photos and anything that reminded me of a life that had stopped being mine long before the papers were signed. But I didn't just move on, I rebuilt. I sold the Kettle Creek land. Took part of the proceeds and used it to start something I hadn't seen before, a support foundation for men going through betrayal, divorce, and marital fraud. It started small, just a few guys at a community center. But word spread. Emails started coming in. Stories like mine and worse. Men who'd felt invisible, blamed, broken. I gave them a voice. And in turn, they gave me purpose. We started offering workshops, legal education, financial literacy, emotional recovery. I partnered with therapists, attorneys, and counselors. We named it New Ground, and within a year, it became something real. Something that mattered. It didn't fix what had happened, but it gave it meaning. And in the quiet moments, I found peace in the most unexpected way through a woman named Jane. She owned the little bookstore across from my office. Soft-spoken, curious, and completely uninterested in anything I had or didn't have. We met over coffee. Talked about poetry. Never once did she ask about Kaylee. She just saw me for who I was in that moment, not who I used to be. It wasn't love at first sight. It was trust at first honesty. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man recovering from a betrayal. I just felt like me. Whole. Honest. Free.